All right, so another experiment that was done, Zimbardo in social psych, and Zimbardo, he's still around, so he actually wrote some of the AP and college textbooks, but probably his most famous experiment is the Zimbardo prison study. Philip Zimbardo has students at Stanford University play the roles of prisoner and prison guards in the basement of a psychology building. So he had boys, men, sign up to be a part of this experiment, and then he assigned some of them to be prison guards. And he actually had where they went out in vans and grabbed the guys that were going to be the prisoners and took them to the basement of Stanford University, and he had it set up like a prison. They were given uniforms, they were given numbers for each prisoner. So what do you think happened? Because it got really bad really quickly. Like, he had expected this experiment to go on for a while, and it was cut short within a couple of days. It says a lot about human nature. So Zimbardo assigned the roles of guards and prisoners to random students and found that guards and prisoners developed role-appropriate attitudes. He showed how we de-individuate, that term we were talking about in class, and become the roles that we are given. These were just normal, everyday college students. And quickly, they kind of, you see down there in the bottom pictures, I mean, they came up with, especially the guards, they had no actual technical control over the prisoners. They could have stopped at any time. The prisoners, they followed the APA guidelines. This was in 1972. They could have left at any time. They had been briefed. They knew what was happening, and they could have left. And they chose not to. They fell into these roles, and it actually spiraled out of control because the prison guards were doing things like you see down there. They were making them stand in hours. They were putting them in solitary confinement. They were using physical punishment. They weren't feeding them. And none of these were things that Zimbardo had told them to do or asked them to do. They just fell into those roles really, really quickly. And so this idea is how when we are in group settings, when we are given these roles, we become that person, that it's very, very easy to just slip into that kind of role and become either a prison or a prison guard, even though they committed no crime. They had done nothing wrong. They had just signed up for this experiment. So the bigger question here is, what happens when we become aware that our attitudes don't match our actions? And they actually found Zimbardo, and we'll see some of these clips in class, but I actually went back and interviewed a lot of the people that participated in the experiment, and actually found that a lot of them experienced psychological issues later on in life that they contributed to this experiment because it was outside of their norm. They didn't know why they were behaving. Kind of the same kind of discussion you had after World War II and the Holocaust. Why did normal everyday people act in these atrocious ways? They were following orders, that idea of conformity and group behavior and drive. So what happens when we become aware that our attitudes don't match our actions don't match our actions, sorry. But so for example, like, why, this is our attitude. We don't have anything against this person. Why are we behaving in such a manner? So do attitudes tell us about somebody's behavior? There's a theory called cognitive dissonance, that people want to have consistent attitudes and behaviors when they are not. They experience what's called dissonance. Dissonance is unpleasant tension. So for example, you have a belief that cheating on tests is bad. And so you're like, I would never cheat. But then you cheat on a test. And so your subconscious would say, the teacher was really bad, so it was okay. And that's cognitive dissonance. So we want to have consistent attitudes. We want to have beliefs. We want to have morals. We want to have values until they're hard, until it becomes unpleasant. And usually we change our attitude. So the ice cream example up there, I want to be skinny, I want to diet, I want to be healthy, I don't want to eat this ice cream. And then we are in an ice cream shop and all of our friends have ordered ice cream and it's unpleasant. And you're like, oh, but I really want it. And so then you're like, oh, I'm just going to have it this one time. And so that's cognitive dissonance. We have a drive, we want consistent attitudes, beliefs, but we don't necessarily want to, we don't like the unpleasantness that comes with it sometimes. So here's just a cartoon. Why should I hire you as my consultant? I'll use my special process of cognitive dissonance to improve employee morale. And the boss says, how does that work? When people are in an absurd situation, their minds rationalize it by inventing a comfortable illusion. And he says, okay, go do it. Isn't it strange that you have this dead-end job where you're twice as smart as your boss? The hours are long, the pay is mediocre, nobody respects your contributions, and yet you freely choose to work here? It's absurd. No, wait, there must be a reason I must work here because I love the work. I love this job. Next. So the idea is that maybe you don't like your job, and so it's kind of bad, but then people, when they point it out to you, you have to start thinking about, why do I like this job? And you're like, oh wait, I love it. I love my job. And your attitude quickly changes. So thinking about going to college, Fiona's attitude, the tuition is so high here, I can't really afford it. So Fiona's behavior, like the school, they must need money. And so the dissonance, the way she resolves it is saying, maybe the school has a point, maybe they do need the money. Other examples, smokers find all kinds of reasons to explain away their unhealthy habit. The alternative is to feel a great deal of dissonance. You either are unpleasant about it, or you just smoke, or you do it, and you get past it, and you move on. Like the sound effect. Other examples, consider someone who buys an expensive car, but discovers that it's not comfortable on long drives. The dissonance exists between their beliefs that they have bought a good car and that a good car should be comfortable. We expect if we pay a lot for something that we're going to like it, or that we love it, and that it's comfortable. Dissonance could be eliminated by deciding that it doesn't matter, since the car is mainly used for short trips. It's not important that it's not comfortable. I'm just going from here to here. Or you focus on the car's strengths, such as safety, or yet maybe it doesn't feel good, but it looks really good. Think about if you've ever worn a pair of shoes. Boys, this may not apply to you necessarily, but if you ever worn a pair of shoes and they're really pretty, but they hurt your feet really bad, but you still wear them because you're like, well, I look really good in these shoes. That's dissonance, and that's solving your dissonance. And there are all kind of ways to do that. You could also get rid of the car, but this behavior is a lot harder to achieve than just changing your beliefs, right? Think about this for an example, is how does cognitive dissonance theory play a part in pledging a fraternity? I'm going to kind of leave you with that. But thinking about how would cognitive dissonance, how would it play a part in the hazing? And that's been a big topic in the news recently, and some, especially in South Carolina, with Clemson University, with a student that died. So think about how do we explain that cognitive dissonance? And I'm not talking about explaining his death, but how do we explain being a part of that, pledging a fraternity? How do we explain it in terms of cognitive dissonance? Think about that. If you have any other questions, we will talk about it in class.